Hello and welcome into Next Point Wins. I am your host, Matthew Geely. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. Selection Sunday is in the books. Tournament Championship Sunday in the books. And now the field is set for this year's March Madness tournament. And boy, do we have a lot to get to today on the show. It's going to be all basketball as we dive into the bracket. I'll go region by region, tell you teams to watch out for, teams to avoid, and who I think will be cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. Also, we will look even deeper into Purdue's first round matchup against Old Dominion. Purdue gets the 3 seed out of the South, playing in Hartford, Connecticut, trying to win their first 2 games and move on to the Elite 8 and Sweet 16 in Louisville. So we'll have a look at that. But first, let's go backwards and talk about how we got to this point. And we have quite a bit to unpack here from the Big Ten tournament and the other conference tournaments around the country. Minnesota knocked off Purdue 75-73 on Friday in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament. It was Purdue's first game in the Big Ten tournament. I'm sure most of my listeners in the Purdue area watched the game, but anybody around the country who follows Purdue and didn't get a chance to tune into Big Ten Network, it was a game of runs, a game of trends, and one overall trend that seemed to make the difference was our inability to guard in the post. And once again, we get a big deficit against Minnesota, something that we just saw a couple weeks ago. It wasn't even a couple weeks ago. It was last week. We saw the Boilermakers get down big against Minnesota and fight their way back, but it came up just a little bit short. Take a look at the box score. It was a much more team effort for the Boilermakers since the last time we saw Minnesota and Minneapolis. If you remember, that was the game where no bench points, nobody off the bench scored. Carson had trouble. He's been struggling of late. And it was up to our starting 5 to get the victory, and they came up just a couple plays short. And while this one was a little different, though, we saw quality minutes out of Travion, Wheeler, and Sasha, all playing above or at 10 minutes of play. Travion had 8 points, Wheeler with 8. 2 really, really good efforts off the bench. And then if you look at the starters, I don't think anybody had a better game than No-Gel Eastern, who single-handedly was carrying a lot of the load in the second half. A couple times down the court, back-to-back times at one point, he got in the paint and did what his abnormally large frame for a guard can do, and he posted up somebody smaller than him and had a nice couple good post moves. He ended up with 11 points, playing 36 minutes, best on the team. And normally we see Eric Hunter Jr. kind of take a little bit of the wear and tear off of No-Gel. Hunter Jr. only playing 4 minutes in this game, didn't have a great effort. 1 rebound, 1 turnover, and it was a costly one down the stretch. Ryan Klein also with a pretty big game, second half especially, got things going in the second half. Purdue, as a team, didn't turn the ball over much. Total of 9 turnovers in the game. There was a lot of splits between the two teams that the Boilermakers actually were better in. Like I said, Ryan Klein hit some big shots in the second half. He ended up with 14 points. Harms had 16 points. An efficient 8 of 12 from the field. An efficient Matt Harms is always a good Matt Harms, and he was very efficient in this game. So all the numbers looked like they were in the right area. And I know numbers don't tell the whole story, and I don't really pride myself on being a numbers guy. I'm not really a math guy in general, but I always like to start with the numbers to kind of see, okay, where are the holes? And then you can kind of see, okay, where do things not match up to normal Purdue victories, especially road victories or neutral site victories? Where do things not match up? And then we kind of look into, like, okay, why didn't that happen? Offensively, Purdue played a very good game. And that's why the numbers don't really match up, because offensively they played well. You look on the other side, Minnesota, no bench points, only 3 bench players playing. And they still find a way to get the win. Amir Coffey played all 40 minutes. Murphy played 38 out of 40 minutes. Those two guys had over 20 points. Jordan Murphy was a problem in the paint. We had no answer for him until we did find some luck. I don't know if luck's the right word. We found the right matchup when we had Harms and Travion in there together. So then we saw Matt Painter do in Mackey Arena against the Gophers, which helped us get on a big stretch and get back in it. It's just one of those teams that we just got down against every time. We played them 3 times, and each time we were down at least 10 points in the second half. And that's tough to beat anybody, especially a team who shot well from the free throw line, 16 of 21, got to the free throw line 21 times compared to our 10 times to the line. They had 12 total fouls in the game. We had 17, and 12 fouls in the game for Minnesota. I think at least 2, maybe 3 were on that last drive. I think there was 2 on that last possession where they fouled and fouled. So 10 fouls in an entire game. I don't really want to get into the officiating, but there were multiple times where maybe toes were out of bounds, fouls weren't called, fouls were called. I mean, every time Murphy got the ball in the paint, he was getting fouled, or he was making baskets, or even worse, he was doing both. Grady Eifert had been, or has been, a key part to this team this year with his hustle plays, hitting open shots, making good passes, not turning the ball over, quality minutes, fighting for rebounds, tipping balls out, keeping plays alive. Grady Eifert did not have a game to remember in the Big Ten tournament. Matchup was a problem for him down low. The size differential was a problem for him down low. And offensively, 1 of 5, 0 of 3 from 3. 3 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 4 fouls. It's not an effort that Grady's going to want to really look into probably much. I don't blame him. And this is one of those where it's a quick turnaround. And we saw a lot of teams in conference tournaments, good teams, go down early. Texas Tech went down early. Virginia went down early. It's not always a bad thing. I always say you either want to win it all or you want to lose it early. That being said, I thought it was going to hurt our seed line, but the Boilermakers still get a 3, even though most projections that I don't know if anybody ever checked out. It's called bracketmatrix.com. They take 140 different bracketologists. I mean, you look anywhere, you see your Jerry Palms, your Joe Lenardi's, your Delphi bracketology, your Haslam metrics, your Ken Palm ratings. I mean, there's bracketologists everywhere. Well, this site was really cool, and it's a great idea because it combines them all and gives you percentages. Okay, like this team gets a 3 seed this amount of times, this percentage of times. They get a 4 seed this percentage. Well, our line, after we lost to Minnesota, moved from higher percentage of getting a 3 and moved to a higher percentage of us getting a 4. So I was shocked when, I don't know if shock's the right word, I was pleasantly surprised when we end up getting a 3 seed. And we'll get more into that in a minute here as I start looking at Purdue's region and where we were. But, like I said, you either want to win it all or you want to lose early unless it hurts your seeding. And for Purdue, it didn't hurt their seeding. So it's not all bad. I think Michigan's a matchup problem for us and would have been. Obviously, Minnesota's a huge matchup problem. Has been all year. I don't want to say we got lucky in Mackey Arena, but we got a little Mackey magic in front of the home crowd, and Minnesota stopped hitting shots down the stretch, which many teams do in Mackey. But you got them outside of Mackey, and they hit shots down the stretch at home, and they hit shots down the stretch in a neutral site, and we were just unable to put enough together to get back in it. That being said, had a shot to win it at the end. A tough shot in the corner. Looked good. You know, it was a pretty good release from Carson, heavily defended. Not many players could even get that shot off. Just was unable to go for him. And that's a player that I feel for. I really do. He's struggled of late, no doubt. He's got a little bit of a back issue. There's no doubt in that. It would have been a nice shot for him to go down to kind of get him going and kind of get everybody else off his back. You know, if I had an entire university and an entire fan base absolutely crushing me every game when he's won us so many games this year. If I had a fan base who was constantly on my back, I'd have some back problems too. I have two people look at me the wrong way and I can feel that on my shoulders. But having an entire state, an entire university, and an entire fan base constantly putting you down, yeah, I'd have some back problems as well. I really would. So you know what? Gives them an extra couple days here to rest up. We do play Thursday, so you lose a day there, but at least you bowed out early, so you got about a week to kind of get back and get ready. Because I mean, it gets real now. There's no have a bad day and move on. There's bigger things ahead. No, this is the bigger thing ahead. You got to go, and you got to go now. And the table is set to go now. And it's really exciting. I don't know if you guys were able to tune in for that Big Ten Championship game. I was driving back. I should say riding back. My dad was driving. I was riding back from Florida. Spring break, so I was listening to it on the radio. It sounded like an amazing game. I was kind of streaming on my phone a little bit in the first half, and then I just listened on the radio in the second half. Michigan State, those are two really good teams. I don't know if you guys remember, it feels like forever ago, but Michigan came out at the beginning of the year absolutely on fire. Everybody thought they were the best team in the nation. They were scoring the ball, they were defending, they were absolutely blowing out top teams. Now, that being said, they blew out a Villanova team that ended up not being a top team. We'll get to that in a minute as well. But this was a Michigan team that was highly thought of as maybe one of the top 1, 2, 3 teams in the country. And then they kind of went on a little bit of a lull. I mean, obviously they had trouble beating Michigan State. Michigan State kind of has their number. That's another team that's just maybe it's a matchup problem. Michigan State with a little more size, a little more physicality than I think Michigan likes to play against, and I think it got Michigan uncomfortable. And then down the stretch, Michigan State, one of the best teams and one of the best coaches down the stretch in games is Coach Izzo. And Michigan State made big shots. Matt McQuaid made big shots. Cassius Winston made big shots. They made their free throws, and then they defended and rebounded. You make your free throws, you defend and you rebound, and you quickly find out that you have a team that could win close games. And in March, every game comes down to the stretch. Every game is about those last 3-4 possessions and what you do or what you don't do, because it decides it all. You look at this bracket, everybody's similar. These are good teams, top to bottom, good teams. Teams that can get you any day that you don't come ready to play. And that's what makes March Madness so much fun and why everybody gets into it so much. If we had 3 teams, or 2 teams or 1 team who we know is going to win it all, like if we had a Golden State Warriors of college basketball, why watch? Why is it fun? When you know the outcome. We don't know this outcome. Anybody can have a shot at it. That's why it's the best tournament and the best time of year to be a college sports fan and be a sports fan in general. All right. That's the last we'll talk about the Big Ten tournament. Get it behind us. We move on. Bigger things ahead. And by bigger things ahead, let's talk the bracket. I'm going to go region by region. We're going to save Purdue's region for last because obviously I have the most to say about it. And that'll give me a chance. We will segue it into our first round matchup against Old Dominion, which, by the way, Old Dominion, any country music fans out there, it's a pretty good band. If you're a Purdue Boilermaker fan, you might want to take a week off from listening to them because they are now the enemy. Anyways, let's take a look at it. Let's start in the East. Top left, if you're visualizing it as your working out or riding home in the car or studying or whatever you're doing, top left of the bracket, your number one seed and your number one overall seed, the Duke Blue Devils. A couple other big seeds to note in that bracket. Your 4 seeds, Virginia Tech. Your 3 seeds, LSU. Big Ten teams in the bracket. You have Minnesota at 10. You have Maryland at 6. And you have Michigan State, the 2 seed, at the bottom of it. Let's start there with Michigan State, because you want to talk about an incredible prize. Congratulations, Michigan State. You have won the Big Ten tournament and a share of the Big Ten regular season. Look behind door number 3 to see your prize. Oh, it's the Duke Blue Devils. What? Duke? You put Duke as a number 1 in Michigan State's bracket? Now, I get it. You got to play everybody to get there, but Elite 8? That's going to be one of the best Elite 8 matchups we've ever had. If things go chalk and they both get there, which I firmly believe they will, that is a very interesting matchup. I mean, you want to talk about just really give it to somebody. I can't believe they had Michigan State in Duke's bracket. And then if you go, you can, after the bracket's posted, they post like the overall seed lines. So like the overall seeding. So obviously Duke was the 1 seed. Virginia was the second 1 seed. North Carolina the 3rd, and Gonzaga the 4th. Tennessee was the top 2. Michigan State was 2nd, then Kentucky, then Michigan. That's why I know it's all about proximity, but if you're the second best 2 seed, I don't know why you're against the overall number 1 seed. It just does not make sense. How do you go from what I thought a borderline number 1 to take over Gonzaga's spot to then instead you get a 2 line and you get Duke in the East, a very tough East region with a couple other Big Ten teams in it. Big Ten gets an overall 8 teams in the field, top in all conferences, even beat out ACC, who got 7. Teams to watch out for, obviously Duke. I don't see a team until Michigan State who can even come close to Duke. VCU and UCF ain't going to do it. Mississippi State's not going to do it. Virginia Tech is interesting. I don't think they can defend well enough or match up well enough to give Duke a real run. That might be a game that Virginia Tech's down about 5 or 6 in the second half. And it's like, man, they might be able to put it together, but Duke ends up winning it by 9 or 10. I would definitely not consider Virginia Tech a huge team to look out for there. As far as teams to get knocked out early, I don't like LSU. I think they're overrated. I don't know if anybody saw that title game. Nope, not title game. SEC. It was the it was the semifinals. LSU lost to Auburn, and if you're not familiar with LSU's story at the moment, their coach got caught on a wire talking about paying a recruit, and so he's been suspended by the university and he's not coaching. Well, the assistant coach for LSU got teed up late in the game after a foul was already called on LSU. Then he got teed up. I think LSU was either up or down 1, but after 4 free throws, they were down like 3. And it just changed the entire complexion of the game. There was only like a minute left, and it just killed them. I think they were up 1, and they ended up going down 3. And then they missed a shot, had to foul, and next thing you know, they lost the game. And you want to talk about a bad look for an interim head coach. It was just a moment that you cannot get teed up at. You just can't. You absolutely can't. I don't care how bad of a call you thought it was. When you're up 1 and the worst you can do is be down 1 if the kid makes them both, you cannot give him 4 chances at it. to take the lead and then extend the lead. So that is one of many reasons why I don't think LSU's legit. I don't know if Yale can get them. That's their first round matchup, 3 against 14. Speaking of that, there's a R.J. Bell, who is he's a Vegas sports podcaster, bettor, writer. He's all about sports gambling. He put out a couple interesting tweets. You can go follow him, RJ in Vegas, on Twitter. The Godfather, if you remember him from the previous season of Next Point Wins, kind of turned me on to him and gave me some insight on who he was. Speaking of the Godfather, pretty excited, heading out to Vegas to hang out with Mr. Vegas himself for the first round of the tournament, heading out there Wednesday, staying through Saturday. So I'll be able to catch the Boilermakers in Vegas on Thursday, and then Saturday, it depends on what time Purdue plays. I'm really crossing my fingers that they play Saturday night. That way I can get back into town and see it. But yeah, the Godfather, gonna go tear up a little Vegas with them. Should be fun. Anyways, he turned me on to this RJ Bell, who put out the favorites for the tournament according to Vegas. Also, he kind of gave some percentages on things to pick and things to look for. He also put out his early odds and his early lines for some of the games. So if you look at it, for instance, I'm going to see how fast I can find this. So for instance, LSU is -9 against Yale. I really think Yale's a team that could shock LSU. I think it's going to be a tight game. They have a legit NBA prospect guard. They move the ball well. They rebound well. They're active on the boards. And they could really give LSU something. So that's something to look out for. A couple other teams in that. What I was trying to say, though, is like he put out percentages on like how often this seed beats this seed. And there's some interesting trends that really happen. He talks about, like, in the round of 64, you should never pick a 1 or a 2 to lose. So in this first round, you should always pick your 1s and 2s. Obviously, Virginia last year is the first time ever. And, I mean, 15 seeds are 8 for 136 on beating the 2 seed. So only 8 times in the history of doing this has a 15 beat a 2, and only 1 time last year, or 1 lost to a 16. He also says that you should pick 1, 13, or 14 seed to upset somebody. 18% of the times in the first round of the game, in the first round, a 13 or 14 seed wins. Obviously, many of the upsets are 12 through 9. 12 seeds have won a game 26 of the 30 years. So only 4 years has all 12 seeds lost. And then 9 seeds have won half the time against 8 seeds. Those 9 versus 8 matches are always a crapshoot. And then a lot of times we see whoever wins that really give a 1 seed a run for their money. I'll talk about which 1 seed might be most vulnerable to not make the Sweet 16 in that second round game. But those 8, 9 seeds are always crapshoots on who's going to win it. But you should always remember, the biggest thing I'm trying to take out of this is that you should pick that 13 or 14 upset. Pick that one team that just might give somebody a run for their money. And then also, you got to look at the 12 seed. 12 seed, there's always a 12 seed that comes out on top. And that's why I go back and I say there's a chance that 14 Yale, that might be your one team, your 1, 13 or 14 seed that wins. I'll give you one more later on that might be the one to look out for, but Yale is interesting to me. And then, so you look at Big Ten wise, Maryland takes on Belmont or Temple. Belmont, probably the most surprising team in the field. A lot of Matrix had Belmont out. Delphi, who's an Indiana high school club that does a bracket every year. They have a club with some teachers that pick it. I think they've done it for the last 3 or 4 years. And that might be even more. They might be up to 5 years now. They're actually credentialed by Purdue Athletics to come to all the events because they're legit. Their numbers the last 3 years have beaten Joe Lenardi's numbers as far as predictions, getting the most teams in the field. This year they only missed one team, and it was Belmont. They had Belmont out. They had TCU in. Most bracketologists missed on that. It wasn't just Delphi who did. And they also, their numbers are normally better when it comes to getting seeds correct and getting within one seed off. They didn't have their best year this year. Nobody really did. First year with the new net analytics and kind of different philosophy from the committee. So they even tweeted out saying that they'll learn from this and be better next year. But Belmont was the one team that didn't have in, and they get in and they get a playing game against Temple. Winner of that taking on Maryland, and Maryland, another team that got bounced early in the Big Ten tournament. A matchup issue. Sometimes they have trouble scoring the ball, but with Bruno Fernando down low, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Maryland having a good chance to win a couple games here and kind of move on. That's one area, that East bracket, that really does confuse me because I just don't believe in LSU, but I also don't know who out of the Maryland, Belmont, Temple could really even give LSU a run besides Yale. The thing is this is setting up tailor-made for Michigan State. You look at the two teams above Michigan State in the bracket, Louisville at the 7 seed, Minnesota at the 10. What's probably going to be a really good game. Both teams with a lot of size. Very active. I think Louisville's better than Minnesota. I think Louisville could kind of stay within Michigan State but not really knock them off. And this is just setting up for Duke Michigan State in an Elite Eight matchup that's going to be one for the record, for the books. I mean, that's a Final Four national championship type matchup, and you get in the Elite Eight. Team who comes out of that game is going to have a really, really, really good chance to win it all. Moving down, let's go to the West. So right below it, so the bottom left, if you're on a treadmill, if you're trying to visualize it, your 1 seed down there is Gonzaga. They came in as the 4th overall number 1. And before this tournament even started, in my head, I was telling myself and trying to explain it to anybody who would listen to me, which can sometimes be tough. I was going through my head on, okay, who are the top seeds that if I'm not a top seed, I want to be in their bracket? When I looked at number 1 seeds, it was Gonzaga, obviously the top seed I wanted to be in their bracket, because I think that I was looking at it from a Purdue headspace, but also just anybody's headspace. Like if I was an 8-9 seed, I want Gonzaga as my 1. I don't want Duke. I don't want North Carolina. Second on my list was Virginia. And then I was looking at 2 seeds. And from a Purdue standpoint, I didn't want Michigan State or Michigan because we've seen them, obviously. But overall, I really didn't want Kentucky because Kentucky's dangerous. So I went with Tennessee as my 2 seed I wanted. Ding, 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 we got them. And then looking at 3 seeds, aside from Purdue, LSU was the name that popped out on my head first. So then once Purdue got, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that in a minute. So anyways, back to it. Gonzaga. This is a bracket where if you're a team who's not in the top, that's a team that you're probably excited to see. And the team who I think has a chance to knock them off, and if you're picking a 1 seed to lose and not make it, like RJ Bell said, if you're picking a team, a 1 seed, not to make it to the Sweet 16, I think it's Gonzaga who gets knocked out, and they get knocked out by Syracuse. Syracuse plays that zone defense that gives people troubles every single year. They're going to get their star point guard back when they have their full team. They've shown in the ACC they're battle tested. They can play against the best. They have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after a pretty good run in the ACC tournament that was bowed out, kind of short due to losing their star point guard. If he's back and he's healthy, Syracuse Gonzaga could be a matchup where Syracuse finds a way to knock them off. Other teams worth of note in that bracket, the 4 seed Florida State, another really good team. I think if Gonzaga somehow gets to that Sweet 16, Florida State's going to be a serious problem for them. They're athletic, they can shoot the ball, they can match up well. We saw them match up against Duke and play Duke tough. for most of that ACC championship game. Florida State's an active, lengthy team who's underrated, probably should be a 3 seed, got a 4, and now matches up with the potential matchup in the Sweet 16 against Gonzaga in a game that they definitely have a great chance to be around in. If we're looking at upsets first round, a lot of people think the Murray State Marquette matchup is a saucy one, the 12-5 as a 12-5 upset. Those 12 seeds are always difficult. Murray State with Morant, top 5 lottery pick. I don't want to. I don't believe in it. No, I believe he's a good player. I don't believe that they can knock off Marquette. Marquette too much. Their guards are phenomenal. That Howard is a strong guard. They shoot the ball really well. I think this is a game where John Morant has a great game, plays really well, but I don't think Murray State. I think they got a very favorable 12 seed. I think Marquette knocks them off. Keep going down the list. Buffalo as the 6th seed in the West. Everybody's high on Buffalo. Everybody thinks Buffalo's legit. Personally, I don't. I don't like Buffalo. They hung around against a lot of bad teams throughout the year. Bowling Green almost beat him in the championship game. I don't think I think Buffalo was helped by a very easy schedule, and I don't think they are legit. So I think either team that wins, I'm hoping it's St. John's, because I think St. John's really could beat Buffalo. But the winner of that Arizona State-St. John's game, you always see one of those playing games keep going and win the next game. I think it's going to be the winner of that matchup beats Buffalo and moves on, which really works to Michigan's favor as the 2 seed in that bracket, another team to look out for. And it's not a surprise, Michigan with a good draw. You get Gonzaga in your bracket. You get a pretty weak Buffalo team as your 6, and then your 3 seed, Texas Tech. That's where I think we see winner of that game comes out of that bracket. The winner of Texas Tech Michigan, 3 versus 2. The winner of that game, in my opinion, comes out of the bracket. A lot of people are picking Florida over Nevada down there. That 7-10 matchup. Nevada the 7, Florida the 10. I think Nevada's really good. I think Nevada avoids the 7-10 upset and takes on Michigan in the second round. Texas Tech takes care of Northern Kentucky. And then they get the winner of Buffalo, Arizona State, or St. John's. I think the Arizona-St. John's winner beats Buffalo, then Texas Tech beats them. Then you get Texas Tech, Michigan lined up. And then if Gonzaga somehow finds a way to get out of that top against a good Marquette team, a good Florida State team, and a good Syracuse team, those are all 3 teams that I think have a chance to beat Gonzaga before they even get to see the bottom of the bracket in the Elite 8. I think Michigan or Texas Tech come out of it. I think Gonzaga doesn't get to the Elite 8. I think Florida State or Syracuse knock them off. Now, where do we go from there? Well, that's for you to decide. Personally, I have Texas Tech coming out of that bracket. They're the top defensive team in the country, and defense travels. They had the Big 12 Player of the Year. They can score the basketball, which is something that they couldn't do last year. And that was the difference, even though they scored enough to beat Purdue. They have... Sorry, losing my train of thought here as I try to remember what I'm looking for. Anyways, they play defense. Big 12 Player of the Year. Well-coached team. All that on top of the fact that pretty favorable matchup. Michigan has shown. I think Texas Tech is very similar to Michigan State. Maybe better defensively and not quite as good offensively as Michigan State. But if we look at the build and the size of Texas Tech, very similar very similar to Michigan State, and we saw how much trouble Michigan had against them. I think Michigan, don't get me wrong, there's a great Michigan could come out of this and win that game. That's why I'm saying it's really up to you to decide on who you really want to go with when it comes to that. But I'm not sold on picking Michigan to go on and be better. I do have Texas Tech. I mean, they average for a good part of the year. They were one of the top teams in the country. I mean, they started off. They have wins. I mean, they whooped Nebraska early on. That's not exactly a huge win, but they lost to Duke by 9. Excuse me, bad math guy, 11. That was early in the year. That was when Duke was second in the country. Look at their stretch through the Big 12, and I'm not saying the Big 12 is good, but they're definitely the cream of the crop to come out of the Big 12. They're probably very similar to Michigan overall, honestly. And they have a player in Jarrett Culver. There we go. Finally got his name. He averages 18.5 a game, 3 assists a game. Overall, they average 73 points a game, and they only allow 59. That's 4th best in the country. And a lot of the analytics that kind of adjust as far as level of play, conference of play, everything. A lot of the Jerry Palm's analytics and Ken Palm and Haslam, all three have Texas Tech as the best defensive team in the country. So I think they do knock off Michigan and come out of that bracket, which I think sets up a Duke/Michigan State. Like I said, that's a game that you're going to have to choose as well, against Texas Tech. I'm high on Texas Tech. That could be the one that comes back to bite me, but I'm high on Texas Tech. Another team who lost early in their tournament and gave them a little extra time to get ready, might I add. It's not all bad Purdue lost. We're not going back to the Big Ten tournament. We're moving on. Got it. Here we go. To the Midwest, bottom right. I'm saving Purdue's area for last because that's how I want to end the show. And it's my show, so I get to decide. And this is a good time as we're halfway through the bracket to kind of take a minute to catch our breath. Talk about what we know, what we don't know. Give a chance for me to take a drink of coffee. You might be noticing that this is not on camera today. We're actually doing this live from my room as the radio station has not opened from spring break. I don't really know what that means, but I'm just following it. So this is only available in podcast form. Link will be tweeted out on my Twitter, Matt_Geely, and on YouTube, Next Point Wins, and SoundCloud, Next Point Wins. You can contact the show at nextptwins@gmail.com. Also, we will be back in studio, barring any last-minute Purdue basketball practices or Cary radio station issues. We will be back in studio a week from today to recap the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. We'll also recap my trip to Vegas and look ahead to the next 2 rounds, hopefully with the Purdue Boilermakers still alive. Okay. To the Midwest. Number 1 seed is North Carolina. The 2 seed is Kentucky. Two blue bloods there. Your 3 seed down there is Houston, who just lost their championship game in pretty deciding fashion to Cincinnati. And your 4 seed is Kansas. Other teams to note, Auburn, who won the SEC championship game over Tennessee yesterday. That's your 5 seed. Kansas comes in at your 4 seed. And your 6 seed is Iowa State. Let's unpack it. First, North Carolina. Pretty favorable little route here for North Carolina. Probably the top 1 or 2 routes of anybody. They get Iona first, and they get Utah State or Washington. Neither of which should concern North Carolina at all. North Carolina is a really good team. I was afraid North Carolina was the 2 seed, where if they fell off the 1 line to the 2 seed line, that's a team I did not want to see. And the other team in the 2 line I didn't want to see, outside the Big Ten, of course, was Kentucky. Kentucky's a really good team. That's a team that could be one of the 2 seeds to make it to the championship game. Which brings me to another one of R.J. Bell's kind of things to remember and watch out for. He says you should advance all the number 1 seeds into the Sweet 16 unless for a very good reason. 86% of number 1s overall make it. But you should also advance at least one double-digit seed, so 10 or higher, to the Sweet 16. At least one has made it in 32 out of the 34 years. And that's where people usually get caught up. It's hard to bring a team of 10 seed or higher to the Sweet 16. But we saw it last year multiple times in multiple spots, and we see it often, according to R.J. Bell and his analytics, that it happens. But if you're going to move one of those double-digit seeds into the Sweet 16, it shouldn't be over number 12. So 12, 11, and 10. One of those teams in the 12 seed line, 11 seed line, or 10 seed line should be going to the Sweet 16. Anything 13 or 14, 15, or 16 has only happened 1.6% of the time. So I'll give you the 10, 11, or 12 seed that you should advance to the Sweet 16 is this is where I'm supposed to really insert a drum roll, but I don't have a drum roll handy. In the East, your 10, 11, 12 are Minnesota, Belmont/Temple, and Liberty. It's not going to be out of the East. Your West is Florida, Arizona State, St. John's, and Murray State. It's not going to be out of the West. Your Midwest is Seton Hall, Ohio State, and New Mexico State. And I think I might have just stumbled across my winner. But let me make sure let me check the South first. It's going to be Iowa, St. Mary's, and Oregon. Okay. It's not going to be St. Mary's because I'm not picking them over Purdue. Alright. Your 10 or 11 or 12 that's going to make it to the Sweet 16 comes out of the Midwest, and it is New Mexico State. And it just so happens that we are in the Midwest right now when I'm talking about it. So that just works perfectly. New Mexico State should make it to the Sweet 16 to take on North Carolina. New Mexico State, 30-4 on the year. They get Auburn first in the 12-5 matchup. I like them to beat Auburn. Auburn lives and dies by the 3, likes to get out in transition. If they get into this tournament and they can't hit the 3, they are susceptible to be beaten. They're quick on defense. They have quick hands, but when their shots aren't falling, they don't do well. And those type of teams, year in and year out, have serious issues in the tournament. It's very rare that you find a team that just gets hot shooting on offense and carries it all the way through the tournament. It's just hard to do in these big arenas on neutral floors. Teams who just shoot the ball well and don't do anything else super well have trouble. Auburn's one of those teams. They might have some trouble. So, if they win that, New Mexico State does, they'll get the winner of Kansas and Northeastern. Kansas is by far the weakest of the 4 line. I think they should be a 5 seed or a 6 seed. Very, very, very underwhelmed by Kansas. I think they got the 4th seed based on a bad Big 12 that they were able to get through and win it all. Excuse me, not win it all. They lost it to Iowa State, who won the Big 12 championship. They have Bill Self. They're a name. They're a blue blood. And I think all that worked to their favor in getting that 4 seed, because I don't think they're a very good 4 seed at all. That's a 4 seed that if I'm a number 1, I'd love to have, and North Carolina's got a good one, and having Kansas in their bracket. But I don't think they get to the Sweet 16. New Mexico State beats Auburn, beats Kansas, gets to the Sweet 16, and gets thumped by North Carolina. But you made it to the Sweet 16 in my book. Bottom half of the bracket, Iowa State, Ohio State, Big Ten team represented there. Iowa State's a really good team, very active, good guards. They got a strong premier player in Shayok. I think they're going to be way too much for Ohio State to handle, and Iowa State beats them. Houston I'm really iffy on. They've had a really good season. They didn't look great against Cincinnati, and it was just a weak after they whooped Cincinnati in the regular season, but they did not look good in that final on Sunday. They are the 3 seed, the 2 seed being Kentucky. Kentucky with a pretty clear path here. Wolford, who, let it be known, Wolford as a 7 seed, sneaky good team. Should take care of Seton Hall. Don't let the name fool you. That's a good team. It's unfortunate they get Kentucky in round number 2. I think if they would have came in as a 6 seed or a 5 seed, they would have had a good chance to go to the Sweet 16. But I don't think they get by Kentucky. I think Kentucky ends up, it goes chalk 1-2, North Carolina, Kentucky in the Midwest. And there's another one of those games, just like Duke, Michigan State, that the caddy corner, top left and bottom right, Midwest and the East, I think they go chalk, and I think they set up unbelievable Elite 8 matchups against, in my opinion, the top 4 teams in the country. I think the top 4 teams in the country are taking on each other in the Elite 8. And it really is a pick'em. It's hard for me to go against Duke, and it's really hard for me to go against North Carolina because those 2 teams are phenomenal. But if anybody could knock them off, I really think it's Kentucky and Michigan State. So those are 2 matchups in the Midwest and the East I definitely would keep an eye on. West, as I mentioned, is really mumbo-jumboed with possibly the 2 seed Michigan, possibly the 3 seed Texas Tech, and possibly Syracuse as the 8, knocking off Gonzaga before they even get to either of those 2 teams on the bottom. And if Syracuse can't do it, like I said, Florida State. So the West is mumbo-jumboed, and then that brings me to the South. Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups in Louisville. First round matchups, your number 1 seed and your second number 1 overall seed is Virginia. They get Gardner-Webb, who, in many people's eyes, including my own, think that Gardner-Webb kind of got screwed being a 16 seed. I think they're more of a 14. So that's a pretty strong 16 seed. And I know everybody's going to tune in because it's Virginia against a 16, and we saw how it went last year. I don't think they lose this one, but Gardner-Webb can play some basketball. So if they find a way to score and they are hanging around in the second half, oh boy. You start talking about thoughts creeping into heads of college kids playing a game. What pressure is that if you go into half or you go into the second half and it's within a 3-4 point ball game, or God forbid you're down in the second half? Oh boy. I wouldn't want to be a Virginia fan if that happens. And Gardner-Webb could be the team. But let's say Virginia beats them like they probably should, and how you probably should predict it and play it in your bracket. You should probably pick Virginia. Moving on down, Mississippi, Oklahoma, the 8-9. Nothing too fancy going on there for me. Don't really care for either team. A Big Ten team worth of note at the 5 seed, Wisconsin, against Oregon, the 12. That's a matchup that I've heard a lot over these last 12 hours. And it's probably been 16 hours, 18 hours, 20 hours, whatever. That Oregon, with a great chance to knock off Wisconsin. Oregon, I guess, a really good defensive team. What I don't get about that, let me put this clear. I think Wisconsin wins the game. I don't really love Wisconsin, but I think they beat Oregon. Oregon had to win their conference tournament just to make the tourney. They surprised everybody, got on a roll, got hot in the Pac-12 and won that tournament. Pac-12 a really, really, really bad league this year. But everybody's all high on Oregon and how well they play defense and how much it's going to bother Wisconsin. People act like Wisconsin's some kind of offensive juggernaut who, if they run into a buzzsaw defense, they're going to be in trouble. Nobody likes to rock fight like Wisconsin. You give Wisconsin a 42-38 game, oh, they are just, it's tailor-made for them. So I don't know, there's a bunch of people who don't know Big Ten basketball and don't know Wisconsin, thinking that Wisconsin likes to go and put up 80 on somebody. Are you kidding me? There's not a team in the Big Ten who likes to rock fight like Wisconsin likes to rock fight. So give me low scoring, give me a slow tempo, and give me Wisconsin to knock off Oregon. Kansas State, UC Irvine, Kansas State the 4 seed, Villanova the 6, Purdue the 3, Cincinnati the 7, Iowa, another Big Ten team in that South region at the 10, taking on Cincinnati, and then Tennessee is your 2 at the bottom. So, where do things get interesting? Okay, let's start best scenario for Purdue. You beat Old Dominion. We'll go into that matchup here in a moment. You get Villanova, St. Mary's. St. Mary's just knocked off Gonzaga. This is where I think it's interesting in Purdue's bracket and why I think the South gets to join the West on 2 brackets that could absolutely get screwed up and thrown around and mumbo-jumboed. I think East and the Midwest go chalk, but South and West get interesting. I think this one gets interesting because you have 2 teams who are going to face top-ranked teams in the second matchup or early on. That could be a problem. Cincinnati just knocked off a really good Houston team to win their tournament, which shows you that Cincinnati can beat anybody on any day on neutral court, and they're not afraid. So, Cincinnati against Tennessee in the second round could be interesting. Cincinnati could have a great chance to knock them off. St. Mary's knocked off Gonzaga to win their conference tournament on a neutral floor. Gonzaga, number 1 team, a number 1 overall seed. A number 1 seed is what I'm trying to say. So, St. Mary's absolutely could take Villanova and take them to the woodshed. Villanova is not a Villanova team that we're used to. And I'll go more into this as this tournament moves on if needed. But it's worth noting Villanova is not the Villanova you normally hear. They've lost a lot of bad teams in the Big East throughout the year. They've stayed close against a lot of bad teams in the Big East throughout the year. They had to take Seton Hall into overtime just to win their Big East tournament. They're going to get in either way, but that Big East win probably moved them from a 7 or 8 to a 6 seed. They are a very high 6 seed. They go into the category with Kansas as teams that got higher seeds because of their name. I don't think Villanova is a legit 6 seed. I don't think that they should be considered as much of a fear as a lot of Purdue fans are probably putting on Villanova. It doesn't mean we can't lose to them. That doesn't mean we're going to even face them or get there or they'll get there. But I'm just saying it's not a Villanova team that we're used to. Now, as I was saying, Virginia, Gardner-Webb. Virginia, if they get by Gardner-Webb, which they should, getting a Mississippi or an Oklahoma team, neither of those two really scare me. They also get some help because Kansas State, as the 4 seed, isn't exactly great. They did win the Big 12. Big 12's overrated. Wisconsin, Kansas State in the Sweet 6, to get to the Sweet 16 is a saucy game for me. Wisconsin and Kansas State, very similar. Both could get it going on any day. I don't really love Wisconsin. That's why I'm having trouble here in this South bracket. Something's weird's going to happen. Somebody's going to knock off somebody. It's either going to be a 1 seed going down or it's going to be Tennessee going down early. But something's going to happen to get all screwed up early on. And I don't know who does it. I don't love Wisconsin, but I think they can beat Oregon, and I think they can beat Kansas State. I don't know who could take down Virginia all the way up to the Elite 8, but it's going to be worth noting. Bottom of the bracket, like I said, Tennessee getting Cincinnati or Iowa. Purdue gets Old Dominion, and then they get Villanova or St. Mary's. And then it sets up, if it goes chalk, Tennessee, Purdue, Virginia, Kansas State. Wisconsin could take over Kansas State's spot, and I think Cincinnati could take over Tennessee's spot. So, let's look at Old Dominion here before we close up shop. Old Dominion. ESPN has Purdue 92% chance to win it. RJ Bell put out his odds earlier in the day on what he thinks the line will be, and he has Purdue a 13.5 point favorite over Old Dominion. Also worth noting in that bracket, Wisconsin is minus 1.5 against Oregon. That got moved all the way down to even. So they think Wisconsin-Oregon is an even matchup. I don't. Villanova favored by only 5 over St. Mary's. I'm telling you, St. Mary's could do some damage there. Now, Cincinnati, by the way, 1.5 point favorites over Iowa. I don't think Iowa's legit. I think Iowa's a broken team, but people still like Iowa. Old Dominion. You might remember they had a pretty big win early in the season. They've played 2 Power 5 schools so far this year. They beat Syracuse 68-62 at Syracuse. They knocked off Syracuse. That's pretty early on in the Syracuse days. Syracuse got much better after that. Much, much better. Syracuse had tough losses to St. Joseph's, Oregon State, Northern Iowa. Syracuse had lost some games. Marshall, Florida Atlantic. Wait, No, I'm completely confused. I'm talking about Old Dominion's losses. Okay, rewind. Old Dominion's had some bad losses, don't get me wrong. But against the two Power 5 teams that they've faced, they've done well. They beat Syracuse, like I said, 60-62 at Syracuse. They played, if we're looking at legit teams, they lost to somebody, but it was close. And I'm frantically looking because I just saw it. And I'm not finding what I'm looking for. I mean, Oregon State, I guess you would call them Power 5, even though Oregon State stinks. They lost to Oregon State 61-56. That's not a very good team they lost to there. They did beat VCU by 10. VCU made the tournament. Good team. Other than that, I mean, obviously they don't play anybody in their tournament, really. They beat Western Kentucky, UAB, and Louisiana Tech in their conference tournament to win it all. I wouldn't exactly call that murderer's row by any stretch. So, they did beat Syracuse, though. I mean, that's worth noting. It's not... Alright, let's just keep positive attitude. Top scorer for them, BJ Sith, a guard. Averages 16 points a game. Shoots 41% from the field, 84% free throw shooter. Best rebounder is also BJ Sith, their guard. Assist leader is Carver, another guard. They're definitely a guard-heavy team. Look at full stats for Old Dominion. This is a team, not exactly a big team. Roster shows that they currently have, their tallest player is listed at, they got a 7'1" center, senior, Elliot Robinson, and they have a 7-foot forward, sophomore, DeJour Dickens. So those are their two tallest players. After that, they go down to 6'8", one player at 6'8", and then it's 6'7" or below. So two big guys. It's interesting because I always look at that, and then I always remember that, Purdue does well against big teams. Like, that's what they like. They don't like lengthy, quick forwards and guards. They like big teams with big thumpers. That Sith, he leads them with 34 minutes a game. I talked about the big guy, DeJour Dickens. He leads the team with 1.7 blocks. He plays 16 minutes a game. He averages 3 points a game. Ahmed Carver, the other guard that I said led him in assists, he averages 16 points a game. So they're a guard-led team. Their top 5. Their top scorers, 5 scorers on the team are all guards. If we're looking 7-footers, that Albert Robinson averages 2 points a game. He only plays 21. He plays 21 minutes a game, but he averages 2 points, so he's not an offensive threat. And then the other one, Dickens, he averages 3 points a game, and he plays 16 minutes. So the two bigs obviously rotate as the two at the center position, but neither of them are offensive threats. As a rebounding team, their big guys don't rebound all that well. Dickens averages 3 rebounds a game, and Carver averages 6, which is second best on the team behind the guard. So, it's a guard-heavy team. We got some good guards ourselves. Nothing that really stands out. There's not a stat on this team that I look at and I think, whoa, that is something that could be a problem. If we look at overall team statistics for Old Dominion, a couple things that I look at. First off, how are they from the free throw line? Second, how are they from 3? And third, do they turn the basketball over? And this is tough because you have to remember they play much inferior teams. And so you have to look at it and think, okay, yeah, they do this well, but who are they facing? And who are they matching up against? As a team, they average 73 points a game. It's pretty high. I guess I should give you Purdue's side by side so you can kind of compare the two. But 73 points per game is a lot. I know Purdue isn't going to be that high. So that's something they like to score. They give up 62 points a game, so they're only outscoring their opponents by 11 points per game. That's not amazing by any stretch of the word. Looking at Purdue overall, they average. I knew it was going to be less. Oh, I'm wrong. 76 a game. Wow, that's more than I thought we did. We do score a lot, I guess. Okay, so we average 76 points a game. They average 72. Opponents average 66. Their opponents average 62. So definitely defensive team. They shoot 36% from 3. We shoot 36% from 3. Very similar there. So they're not one of those teams that's going to come in here and shoot the lights out. They're very similar to us. Free throws, we are a 69. Excuse me, they are a 69% free throw team. We are 73. So they don't shoot the ball quite as well from the line. Other big things I look at, so turnovers. We average 10 turnovers a game, and our margin is plus 4.1. No. Freeze. I'm getting confused. Both teams average 10 turnovers a game, and our margin is 2.3. So we both average the same amount. They create a couple more turnovers than we do. I would factor in who they play as the main reason for that. So what I'm trying to say is there's no stats here that stick out to me and say, holy crap, that's a matchup issue, that's a matchup nightmare, that's a percentage or a situation where I get nervous. It's not like they're going to come in here and shoot 40-some% from 3. Sure, they could get hot and do that, but it's not in their skill set. They're not a team that has a guard that's going pro on a bad team. They don't have a Morant. They don't have somebody like that. They don't have a big man who destroys and dominates a game. They have 2 big guys, but they don't exactly make a difference on the offensive end. And their top 4 scorers are all guards, so they don't even use much of a post presence to really get at you. And we've seen that we have trouble guarding in the post, a.k.a. Minnesota. So, it doesn't look all that bad. Purdue should have no problem here. We shouldn't be all that nervous about it. Obviously, there's always the unknown of it being an NCAA tournament game against a team that made the NCAA tournament. But they won their conference. That's how they got in. They weren't going to be an automatic bid. They were an automatic bid. They weren't going to be an at-large bid. And that's going to set up in round 2 if we can find a way to get through Old Dominion. Unfortunately, I won't have a show before then, so I kind of have to talk about it now. Look out for Villanova. Look out for St. Mary's. Either one of those teams could be a problem, but I think St. Mary's has a great chance to knock off Villanova. And then you watch that bottom of the bracket. Watch and see what Cincinnati does against Iowa, and then you watch and see what they do against Tennessee. There's a chance that Cincinnati could come out of that bottom. And if not, we will talk about Purdue-Tennessee, hopefully, on Monday, if all things go well. There's your bracket breakdown. Enjoy the first round of the tournament. Get TVs, get your computers, get everything lined up, grab some beer, grab some snacks, and get after it. It's one of the best 2 days of the year for a sports fan. Nothing beats that first round. Get it all going. Get it all set up. Be sick from work. Skip class. It's a holiday. It should be considered a holiday. Go enjoy it. This has been Next Point Wins.